Okay, hello and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. For a couple of things as we get started here, if you are attending the webinar for the first time and you have questions as the webinar is going, you can type those into the questions panel on your webinar toolbar, and Josh will answer those questions as they come in. If they're relevant for everyone, I might answer them out loud, and if we miss any as we're going through the webinar, I'll come back to them at the end. Today we're going to be talking about working with the Find Grid. Today's topic is covered in the Membership 102 workbook, if you're following along in the workbooks that are available for purchase on our website. Again, it's Membership 102, and it's pages 13 through 20. And the topic is working with the grid. So without further ado, let's dive right in and open up our membership module. And we're going to go to Find up here at the top left corner of the screen. Now, if you have questions about using the Find criteria and building different searches, that's covered in another webinar that can be viewed on our website in the Support Center under the Documents and Videos, the previously recorded webinars. So we're going to go ahead today and just talk about the Find results and how we can work with those results, not how we compose a search on this criteria screen. So whenever you do a find that results in more than one person being pulled up, it's going to open a grid like this. And the grid will come up with all of the different information about the families and individuals that match the criteria that you searched for. You can move between this grid and an individual's record by placing a check mark in the column here on the left next to someone's name and clicking Go to Record here at the top. And that takes us to that specific person. Then if we need to return to the grid, we just click this grid button. Or if you wanted to compose a new find criteria, you could click either Find button right here and here. The grid is fully editable, so you can make any changes that you need to make right here on this screen as we're looking at it. And you'll notice this column here where it says the names is actually the mailing label. And so while at first glance it may look like there are duplicate records, you're actually seeing two separate individuals. So in this example, these first two people, Mr. and Mrs. Evan Bernard, if we use our scroll bar at the bottom to scroll to the right, eventually we'll come to the first and the last name here. So you can see Nikki is the first person and Evan is the second person, even though they both have the same mailing label, Mr. and Mrs. Evan Bernard. They are two separate individuals. The grid is also a great place to go to if you need to just select a random grouping of people that you need to print out labels or a report for. Because it brings up all of the records, what you can do is simply scroll through this list and place check marks next to whichever, random people you have that you want to print for. And once you've got them all selected, then you can come up here across the top of the grid to Reports, and you have the option of printing a report, labels, or sending an email to this grouping of random records that you may have selected. And then we can use this box at the top, the column header, to select all or to deselect all. Next, we'll take a look at the different display settings we can work with on the grid. And these are all set in the columns and sorting. So if I click that columns and sorting button, it opens up a new window that you may recognize from setting up different types of reports. This is our standard column selector screen. So the items on the left are the available columns. That's all the fields in the database that you could possibly view. Then the fields on the right are the visible columns. That's what we are seeing. And so we can go through the fields and decide exactly which columns of information we want to see by moving them between the two sides. We also have up and down arrows here at the far right where we can move a field up or down the list. For example, I'm going to click on the first name and I'm going to move it way up so that it is beside the mailing label so that it makes that more clear, like we were talking about a few minutes ago. Any fields that you're having trouble finding that you want to see, you can search for them in this Type to Search box right here at the top. As you start typing, the fields that match what you're typing will come up below it. And if you want to just look at all the fields in alphabetical order, you can click the down arrow on this search box, and that will allow you to scroll through all the fields. And then in the lower part of the left side, the fields are grouped into different categories. And the little plus signs allow you to see what's within those categories. So the first set of settings are the columns. That's the columns of information that we're seeing on the grid. The Group and Sort tab allows us to view the list grouped or sorted into different sets of information. For example, we could put status as field 1. Let's put it in ascending order. And then after status, let's go by last name. If I check group by field 1, it will consolidate or collapse all of the records together. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK so we can take a look at what that looks like. And you can see now the list has gone under these different headings for each of the status codes. The first one is blank. So if someone doesn't have anything in their status code, and I press the little plus to expand that heading. So this first set of people are all of the people who don't have any status code. And then it goes through each of the different status codes. And again, we can press the plus to expand and the minus to collapse. And then down at the bottom, we also have expand all. And that allows you to open up all of the categories or ungroup them. And then you can click collapse all to close all of those lists up. Anytime that you go into the columns and sorting and set a sort or a column selection, it saves that until the next time. So if I come in here and I want to remove a bunch of these fields that I am not interested in seeing, I can either double click on them and that moves them to the left side, or I can click the arrow button to move them to the left side. If I want to select multiple fields, I can click on the first one that I want to select and then scroll down. And if I hold my Shift key while I click on another one lower down, carrier route, it'll highlight all of the ones in between the first one I had clicked and the last one that I clicked just by holding down the Shift key. Then I can get rid of all of those fields at once. Then if I click Restore Default Layout, it goes back to that original layout. And then I can toggle back to Restore Saved Layout. And it should go to the layout that I had just selected. We can also change the sorting of the grid directly from this screen itself by clicking on the column headers. For example, if I want to sort it by first name instead of last name, I can right-click on I can single-click on first name, and you can see it puts that little arrow there. And that tells me it's sorting it in ascending order when the arrow is pointing up, or descending order if the arrow is pointing down. So anytime you want to resort the grid, you can click on a column header as opposed to going into the columns and sorting.